The gunshot that sent Caleb Vance diving behind the hay bales was meant for someone else. But he didn't know that when he crawled through his barn door on a cold November evening in 1882. Blood pounding in his ears and wondering if his lonely life in Galesburg, Illinois, would end tonight. The shot had come from somewhere near his house, and as he peered through the darkness of his property, lit only by a sliver of moon, he saw nothing but shadows dancing across the prairie grass that surrounded his ranch. 3 years of solitary living had made him cautious, perhaps too cautious, but out here on the edges of town, caution kept a man breathing. He waited 15 minutes before moving toward his house, a modest 2-story structure he had built himself after purchasing the land with money saved from years of cattle drives. The November wind cut through his wool coat, and he could see his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. No more shots came. No sounds at all except the wind and the nervous shuffling of his horses in the barn behind him. The front door stood slightly ajar, which stopped him cold. He always locked that door. Always. His hand moved to the revolver at his hip as he pushed the door open with his boot, staying to the side in case someone inside decided to shoot through the opening. Nothing happened. He slipped inside, moving quietly despite his large frame, eyes adjusting to the darkness of his front room. Everything looked untouched. His few pieces of furniture sat exactly where they should be, the potbelly stove cold in the corner, his table and chairs undisturbed. He checked every room upstairs, every closet and corner, finding nothing out of place. That left the cellar. The door to the cellar stood in his kitchen, a heavy wooden thing with an iron latch. He approached it slowly, listening. Silence. But when he put his hand on the latch, he heard it, the faintest sound of breathing that wasn't his own. Someone was down there. "I've got a gun," he called out, which was obvious enough. "And I am not afraid to use it. You have 10 seconds to explain why you are in my home before I start shooting through this door." A woman's voice came up from below, trembling but determined. "Please do not shoot. Please, I am not armed. I am not here to rob you, I just needed somewhere to hide." Caleb had not expected a woman's voice. He hesitated, his hand still on the latch. "Hide from what?" "From the men who want to kill me." "Well, that explains the gunshot I heard," Caleb muttered. "Come up slowly. Keep your hands where I can see them." "I cannot. Cannot or will not. Cannot. I am injured." Caleb closed his eyes and took a deep breath. 3 years of peace and quiet, and now this. He opened the cellar door and descended the wooden steps, gun drawn, letting his eyes adjust to the deeper darkness below. His cellar was small, mostly used for storing root vegetables and preserves. The smell of earth and potatoes filled his nose. In the far corner, huddled against the stone wall, he could make out the shape of a woman in a dark dress, her hands indeed visible and empty, pressed against what looked like her shoulder. "I need light," he said, holstering his gun. He went back upstairs, lit a lamp and returned to the cellar. In the lamplight, he could see her clearly now. She was young, probably around 23 or 24, with dark auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and tumbled around her shoulders. Her face was pale with pain, and blood seeped between the fingers she held pressed to her left shoulder. Her dress was expensive, or had been before it got torn and stained with blood and dirt. She looked at him with wide hazel eyes that held both fear and something else he could not quite identify. Determination, maybe, or desperation. "You have been shot," he said, which was obvious enough. "The bullet went through, I think. It hurts, but I do not think it is still inside." Her voice was educated, refined, not the voice of someone who normally found themselves shot and hiding in cellars. "I need to look at it." She hesitated, then nodded. He set the lamp on a barrel and knelt beside her, gently moving her hand away from the wound. She had wadded part of her underskirt against the injury, and the fabric was soaked through with blood. He carefully peeled it away, making her gasp with pain. The bullet had indeed gone through the fleshy part of her shoulder, missing bone from what he could tell. It was still bleeding, but not with the arterial spray that would mean death. She would live if he could stop the bleeding and prevent infection. "I need to clean this and bandage it properly," he said. "Can you walk if I help you?" "I think so." He helped her to her feet and she swayed against him. She was tall for a woman, probably 5'7" or so, and slender. He could feel her trembling as he guided her up the stairs and into his kitchen. He settled her into a chair and went to gather supplies. Water from the pump outside, clean cloth torn from an old shirt, whiskey for disinfecting. When he returned, she was sitting very still, her good hand gripping the edge of the table, her face even paler than before. "This is going to hurt," he warned. "Everything hurts already. What is a little more?" She tried to smile but could not quite manage it. He worked as gently as he could, cleaning the wound with water first, then whiskey. She made no sound, though he saw tears running down her cheeks and felt her body go rigid with pain. When he had cleaned both the entrance and exit wounds, he bandaged her shoulder tightly with strips of cloth. Only when he had finished did she allow herself to slump forward, exhausted. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now you are going to tell me who you are and why someone shot you." She looked up at him, and he saw that determination again in her eyes. "My name is Rebecca Pierce, and someone wants to kill me because I witnessed a murder." Caleb pulled out a chair and sat down heavily across from her. The lamp on the table cast shadows across her face, making her look older than her years. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. He thought about the quiet life he had built here, the peaceful solitude he had chosen after years of violence and noise during the cattle drives. He had come to Galesburg specifically because it was quiet, because nothing much happened here, because a man could work his land and tend his cattle and not have to worry about guns and death. "Start from the beginning," he said. Rebecca took a shaky breath. "I am from Chicago originally. My father was a banker there, quite wealthy. When he died 2 years ago, he left everything to me. I was his only child. My mother died when I was young. I had no other family. A wealthy young woman alone, that must have attracted attention. It attracted the wrong kind of attention. A man named Harold Stinson began courting me. He was charming at first, said all the right things. But when I refused his proposal of marriage for the 3rd time, he became angry. He told me I would regret it. I thought he meant he would simply stop calling on me. I did not realize he meant something far more sinister." Caleb listened as she continued, her voice growing stronger as she told the story. Harold Stinson, it turned out, was not the successful merchant he claimed to be. He was deeply in debt, involved with dangerous men, and had viewed marriage to Rebecca as his way out of financial ruin. When she refused him, he had tried a different approach. He had forged documents claiming they were already married, planning to use them to gain control of her fortune. "I discovered what he was doing by accident," Rebecca said. "I was at my lawyer's office, and I overheard Harold speaking with another man in the next room. They did not know I was there. Harold was explaining his plan. The other man, whose name I learned was Victor, said the forgeries were good enough to convince any judge. They laughed about it, about how I would not be able to fight it, about how women had no real power in these matters. And the murder?" Rebecca's face went even paler. "I was so shocked by what I heard that I made a noise. They realized someone was in the other room. I tried to leave quickly, but as I was going down the stairs of the building, I looked back and saw them come out of the office. They saw me. Harold called out to me, told me to wait. I knew I could not. I ran. She had gone straight to the police, she explained, but when she tried to tell them what she had overheard, she found that Harold had friends in powerful places. The officer she spoke to was polite but dismissive, suggesting she had misunderstood what she had heard, that the stress of her father's death and managing her inheritance had perhaps made her overly suspicious. He recommended she go home and rest. I went home, but I did not rest. I could not. I knew Harold would not let this go. I was right. That very night he came to my house with two men. I heard them breaking in through the kitchen door. I managed to escape through my bedroom window, but not before I heard them discussing what to do with me. One of the men said I should have an accident. Harold agreed. For 3 days, Rebecca had hidden with a friend in Chicago, but Harold's men had found her there. The friend, a woman named Catherine, had been terrified and begged Rebecca to leave before she brought more danger. Rebecca had understood. She had taken what money she could access easily, left most of her belongings behind, and fled Chicago entirely. I made my way west, changing trains several times trying to cover my trail. I thought I had lost them. I arrived in Galesburg yesterday morning. It is a small town. I thought I would be safe here, at least for a little while. I planned to continue west, maybe to California, where I could start over with a new identity. How did they find you? I do not know. But this afternoon I was walking near the edge of town, trying to decide my next move when I saw him, Victor, the man from Harold's conversation. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. I ran. He chased me. He had a gun. I ran toward the only place I could see, your ranch. I saw your barn first, thought about hiding there, but then I saw your house and the cellar door was visible from outside. It was open. You must have been down there earlier. Caleb remembered. He had been down there that morning, bringing up potatoes for his dinner. He must have forgotten to close the outside entrance, the slanted door that led directly down into the cellar from outside. It was careless of him, but if he had not been careless, she might be dead now. I climbed down and shut the door as quietly as I could. From inside, through the cracks, I could see him arrive. Victor, he was looking around trying to figure out where I had gone. Then I heard you coming. You must have heard something or seen him. He fired at you. He missed. Thank God. He ran off after that. I heard him running away. But I was too afraid to come out. I thought maybe he was waiting. And then you came inside the house and I heard you checking the rooms, and I knew you would find me, but I was more afraid of going back outside. Caleb sat back in his chair, processing everything she had told him. It was a wild story, the kind of thing that happened in dime novels, not in real life. But her wound was real enough. The blood on her dress was real. The fear in her eyes was real. You said you witnessed a murder, he reminded her. You told me someone wanted to kill you because of that. Rebecca's face changed, became somehow both harder and more frightened. After I left Chicago, I thought I should document everything I knew. I wrote it all down, every detail, thinking maybe I could send it to a newspaper or a marshal if I could find someone trustworthy. But I needed more than just my word about the forgeries and their plans. I needed proof that Harold was truly dangerous. That proof came when I saw the murder. She had been in St. Louis, she explained, staying in a small boarding house under a false name. One night, unable to sleep, she had gone for a walk despite the late hour. She had heard angry voices coming from an alley and had frozen, pressing herself into a shadowed doorway. Two men had emerged into the pool of light cast by a street lamp. One was Victor. The other was a man she did not recognize, but he looked terrified. Victor was demanding money. The man said he did not have it, that he needed more time. Victor said time was up. Then he pulled out a gun and shot the man right there in the street. I saw everything. The man fell, and Victor stood over him and shot him again just to be sure. Then he looked around, and I thought he would see me, but I held so still. He did not see me. He walked away as if nothing had happened. Did you go to the police there? I was too frightened. I left St. Louis that very night on the first train out. But do not you see? I can identify Victor as a murderer. If Harold knows that, if Victor knows that, they will not stop until I am dead. I am not just a threat to Harold's plan to steal my inheritance anymore. I am a witness to murder. Victor will hang if I testify against him. Harold will be implicated too. They cannot afford to let me live. Caleb stood and walked to the window, looking out into the darkness. This was more trouble than he had bargained for, more trouble than he had dealt with in 3 years. Part of him wanted to tell her to leave, to take her problems somewhere else, to let him return to his quiet life. But another part of him, the part that remembered what it was like to be young and scared and alone, could not do that. "You can stay here tonight," he said finally. "Tomorrow, we will figure out what to do." "You do not have to help me," Rebecca said softly. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing." "No, I do not. But I am not the kind of man who turns away an injured woman, and I am not the kind of man who lets murderers roam free if I can help it." He turned to face her. "But I need you to be honest with me about everything from here on out. No more surprises. Can you do that?" "Yes, I promise." He showed her to the small bedroom upstairs, his only guest room, sparsely furnished with a bed, a chair, and a small dresser. He brought her water and some bread and cheese, which was all he had readily available. She ate slowly, wincing every time she moved her shoulder. When she was settled, he went back downstairs and sat in his front room, his gun on the table beside him, and kept watch through the window. The night passed slowly. No one came. When dawn finally broke, cold and gray, Caleb made coffee and heated water for Rebecca to wash with. He had laid out one of his shirts for her to wear, as her dress was ruined with blood. When she came downstairs, wearing his oversized shirt belted at the waist over her torn skirt, her hair brushed and pinned back neatly, he was struck by how young she looked, and how brave she must be to have made it this far alone. "We need to talk to the marshal," he said, pouring her coffee. "What if he does not believe me? What if he is like the police in Chicago? Marshal Tom Brennan is a good man. I have known him for 3 years. He is honest. Can you be certain? Harold had friends I never suspected, men my father had trusted. How do I know who can be trusted anymore?" It was a fair question. Caleb thought for a moment. "We will tell him the basics first, feel him out. If I sense anything wrong, we will leave. But Rebecca, you cannot run forever. Eventually, you need to face this." She nodded slowly. "I know, I am just so tired of being afraid." They finished their coffee in silence. Caleb hitched up his wagon, and they made the hour-long journey into Galesburg proper. The town was waking up as they arrived, shopkeepers opening their doors, early risers heading to the bakery for fresh bread. It was a peaceful scene, so normal and ordinary that it seemed impossible danger could exist here. Marshal Brennan's office was on Main Street, a small building with a single cell in the back. Tom Brennan himself was in his 50s, with graying hair and a weathered face that had seen its share of trouble. He looked up as they entered, his eyes moving from Caleb to Rebecca with curiosity. "Caleb Vance. Have not seen you in town in a while. What brings you in today?" "Tom, this is Miss Rebecca Pierce. She has a story you need to hear." They sat down, and Rebecca told her story again, starting from the beginning. Caleb watched Tom's face carefully, looking for any sign of dismissal or disbelief. Instead, he saw the marshal's expression grow more serious as Rebecca spoke. When she finished, Tom leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long moment. "That is quite a story, Miss Pierce. And you say you can identify this man Victor who committed murder in St. Louis?" "Yes. I saw his face clearly." You know his last name? I heard Harold call him Victor Malone. Tom's eyebrows rose. Victor Malone, I know that name. He is wanted in Missouri for armed robbery. There are posters. If he is involved in murder too, and if you can testify to that, it would be significant. He stood and went to a filing cabinet, pulling out a stack of wanted posters. He flipped through them and pulled one out. Is this him? Rebecca looked at the poster and went pale. Yes, that is him. Well then, this changes things. Miss Pierce, if you are willing to testify, I can wire the authorities in St. Louis and Chicago, but I have to be honest with you. This will take time. Legal processes move slowly, and if these men are as dangerous as you say, you will need protection. She can stay with me, Caleb said, surprising himself. My ranch is outside town, easy to defend. I can keep her safe until this is resolved. Tom looked at him with surprise, then understanding. That is generous of you, Caleb, but are you sure? This could bring trouble to your door. Trouble already came to my door last night. One of Malone's bullets nearly hit me. I am involved now whether I want to be or not. Rebecca looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. Gratitude, certainly, but something else too. I cannot ask you to do that. You are not asking. I am offering. Tom nodded. All right then. I will start sending wires today. In the meantime, you two should keep a low profile. If Malone is still in the area, he might try again. Caleb, you are still a good shot. Good enough. Keep your guns close. Miss Pierce, do you know how to shoot? No. Might want to learn, Tom said seriously. Caleb can teach you. I will come out to check on you both in a few days. Bring any news I have. They left the marshal's office and spent some time in town gathering supplies. Rebecca needed clothes that actually fit, medicine for her wound, and food beyond Caleb's meager bachelor provisions. He used his own money, waving away her protests. She had money, she insisted, but it was dangerous for her to access her accounts. Harold might be watching for any transactions. Caleb did not argue. The expenses were not so great that they would burden him. As they loaded the wagon, Caleb noticed a man watching them from across the street. He was lean and hard-looking, with cold eyes and a scar running down his left cheek. Not Victor Malone, but someone cut from the same cloth. Caleb casually positioned himself between the man and Rebecca. "Get in the wagon," he said quietly. "Do not look around, just get in." Rebecca heard the urgency in his voice and obeyed. Caleb climbed up beside her and started the horses moving. He watched in the side mirror as the scarred man mounted a horse and began following them at a distance. "We are being followed," he told Rebecca. Her face went white. "Harold must have sent more men. We are not going straight home." "Hold on." Caleb urged the horses faster, taking a turn that led east instead of west toward his ranch. The rider followed. They headed into more populated areas, passing farms and other homesteads. The rider kept his distance but did not give up. Finally, Caleb turned down a road that led to a neighbor's property, a farmer named Jim Carlson who owed him a favor. He pulled the wagon right up to Carlson's barn. Jim came out surprised. "Caleb, what brings you out here? Need to borrow your barn for a few minutes, Jim. We have a tale." Jim's expression changed, became hard. He was a veteran of the war and he understood trouble when he heard it. "Get the wagon inside. I will handle this." They pulled into the barn and Jim closed the doors behind them. Through gaps in the wood, Caleb saw the rider approach, slow, looking confused. Jim walked out to meet him, shotgun in hand but held loosely, not quite threatening but not friendly either. "Help you with something," Jim called out. The rider pulled up. "Looking for someone." Man and woman in a wagon. Saw them come this way. "Lots of wagons come this way. It is a road. What business is it of yours?" "Private business." "Well, this is private property, and I do not like strangers riding up without an invitation. I suggest you move along." The rider stared at Jim for a long moment, weighing his options. Jim did not back down, and finally the rider wheeled his horse around and rode off. Jim waited until he was out of sight before opening the barn doors. "Friend of yours?" Jim asked dryly. "Not exactly. Thanks for the assist, Jim." "Any time. You in some kind of trouble, working on getting out of it. I will explain later. Can we use your back trail to get home, less exposed than the main road?" "Go ahead. And Caleb, you need help, you send word. I mean that. I will." "Thanks, Jim." They took the back trail, a rougher path that wound through wooded areas and crossed streams, but it was less visible and harder to follow. By the time they reached Caleb's ranch, it was late afternoon. Rebecca was pale and exhausted, her shoulder clearly paining her. He helped her inside and made her rest while he unhitched the wagon and put the horses away. That evening, as he prepared dinner, she came downstairs looking better. She had changed into one of the simple dresses they had bought, a practical brown cotton that suited her better than the ruined finery she had arrived in. Her hair was down, hanging loose around her shoulders, and in the lamplight she was beautiful in a way that made his breath catch. "You do not have to do all this," she said, gesturing to the cooking. "I can help. With your shoulder, not likely. Besides, I have been cooking for myself for 3 years. One more mouth to feed is not a hardship. Still, I feel useless. You survived being shot and chased across 3 states by killers. I would not call that useless." She smiled, a real smile this time, and it transformed her face. "When you put it that way, I suppose I have been rather resilient." They ate together, and for the first time since she had arrived, they talked about things other than murder and danger. She asked him about his ranch, how he came to be in Galesburg, what his life was like. He found himself telling her things he had not talked about in years. How he had grown up in Kentucky, left home at 16 to work cattle drives, spent 10 years moving from place to place. How he had saved every penny he could, dreaming of his own land. How he had finally found this place and built it into something he could be proud of. "It must be lonely," she said softly, "out here by yourself." "I chose lonely. After years of being surrounded by men, sleeping in camps, always moving, always noise, I wanted quiet. Lonely felt like a blessing. And does it still?" He looked at her across the table, at this woman who had tumbled into his life with her trouble and her courage and her hazel eyes that saw too much. "I am starting to think maybe it is not as much of a blessing as I thought." The next few days fell into a routine. Caleb did his ranch work, tending his cattle and horses, fixing fences, chopping wood for the coming winter. Rebecca helped where she could, her shoulder healing quickly. She had a natural way with the animals, he noticed. His most skittish horse, a mare named Clover who usually shied from everyone, took to Rebecca immediately. He taught her to shoot, starting with a light pistol that would not kick too hard. She was a natural student, focused and determined, though the recoil clearly hurt her wounded shoulder. She practiced anyway, insisting she needed to be able to defend herself. He found himself admiring her more and more. She could have been bitter, could have collapsed under the weight of what she had been through. Instead, she faced each day with quiet courage. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie gold and crimson, she said, "Tell me about your name, Vance. It is not a common name." "My father's family came from England generations ago. His great-grandfather was a soldier under Cromwell, or so the story goes. Came to America to escape the Restoration. The name was originally de Vaux, French originally, but it got anglicized to Vance. And what would your father think of you sheltering a woman running from killers? My father died when I was young. But if I had to guess, he would say a man does what is right, and the consequences be damned." "That sounds like you." He looked at her. "You do not really know me, Rebecca. We have known each other less than a week. I know you took in a stranger who brought danger to your door. I know you are patient and kind and brave. I know you have made me feel safer than I have felt in months. That tells me a great deal about who you are." Something in the way she said it, in the way she looked at him, made his heart beat faster. He had been alone so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to have someone look at him like that. To have someone care whether he was patient or kind or brave. He had thought he wanted solitude, but sitting here with Rebecca as the stars began to appear, he realized what he had really wanted was peace. And peace, he was learning, did not have to mean being alone. Marshal Brennan came out a week after their first meeting, riding up in the early afternoon. Caleb saw him from a distance and met him outside. Rebecca came out too, wiping her hands on her apron. She had been baking bread, filling the house with a smell that made it feel like a home rather than just a place to sleep. "Tom," Caleb greeted. "Any news?" "Some. Let us go inside." They settled around the kitchen table, and Tom pulled out some papers. "I have been in contact with authorities in Chicago and St. Louis. The St. Louis police confirmed there was a murder matching what Miss Pierce described. They had no witnesses and were treating it as a robbery gone bad. Your testimony, Miss Pierce, changes that. They want you to come identify the body and give a formal statement." "When?" Rebecca asked. "As soon as possible. I can arrange for an escort, deputies to keep you safe." "What about Harold Stinson?" she asked. "And Victor Malone?" "That is where things get complicated. Harold Stinson is a prominent businessman in Chicago with connections. Without hard evidence of his involvement in forgery and conspiracy to harm you, it is your word against his. The Chicago police are investigating, but they are moving slowly. As for Victor Malone, he has disappeared. No one has seen him since the incident here in Galesburg. He might have left the area or he might be laying low." "So I am still in danger," Rebecca said flatly. "I will not lie to you, Miss Pierce. Yes. Until Malone is caught and Stinson is arrested, you are in danger. But your testimony in St. Louis could be the key to bringing Malone down. And if Malone falls, he might give up Stinson to save himself." Rebecca looked at Caleb. "What do you think I should do?" "I think you do not have much choice," he said honestly. "Running has not worked. You need to face this head-on, but I will come with you. You will not face it alone." Tom looked between them, something knowing in his eyes. "Well then, I will arrange for travel in 3 days. That give you enough time to prepare?" "Yes," Caleb said. After Tom left, Rebecca was quiet. Caleb found her later sitting on the porch, staring out at the prairie. He sat down beside her. "Are you afraid?" he asked, terrified but also relieved. "I am so tired of running, Caleb. I want this to be over. It will be. We will see it through together." She turned to him, and in her eyes he saw something that made his chest tighten. "Why are you doing this? Really? You could have turned me away that first night. You could have left this to the marshal. Why are you risking yourself for me?" He thought about it, tried to find words for feelings he barely understood himself. "At first, I told myself it was just the right thing to do. But if I am being honest, it is more than that now. These past days, having you here, it has made me realize how empty my life was before. I thought I wanted solitude, but what I really wanted was peace. And Rebecca, you have given me more peace in these few days, despite all the trouble than I have had in 3 years alone. Does that make any sense?" "Yes," she whispered. "It makes sense because I feel it too. I came here running from danger, expecting nothing but fear and hiding. But you have made me feel safe. Not just physically safe, but safe in a way I have never felt before. Like I can be myself, like I do not have to pretend or perform or be anything other than what I am." They sat in silence for a long moment, and then she reached over and took his hand. It was the first time they had touched beyond the necessary contact of him treating her wound, and the touch sent electricity through him. Her hand was small in his, calloused from the work she had been doing around the ranch, warm and real and alive. "I do not know what happens next," she said. "I do not know if I will survive to see this through, but I want you to know that these days here with you have been the happiest of my life. That probably sounds foolish, given the circumstances, but it is true." "It is not foolish," he said, squeezing her hand, "and you will survive. I will make sure of it." The 3 days passed too quickly. Caleb spent them preparing for the journey, making sure his ranch would be looked after in his absence. Jim Carlson agreed to check on the animals daily. Caleb packed supplies, cleaned his guns, and tried not to think about all the ways this could go wrong. Rebecca spent the time writing. She filled page after page with her precise handwriting, documenting everything she knew about Harold Stinson, Victor Malone, and the events that had led her here. She made copies, sealing them in separate envelopes to be held by Marshal Brennan, Jim Carlson, and the bank in town. "If something happens to me," she explained to Caleb, "these will tell the whole story. Harold will not be able to bury the truth. Nothing is going to happen to you." "You cannot promise that." "No, but I can promise I will do everything in my power to keep you safe." On the morning they were to leave, Rebecca came downstairs wearing her traveling clothes, her hair pinned up neatly, her face composed. She looked every inch the wealthy Chicago heiress she had been, but Caleb had seen the woman beneath that polish now. The woman who laughed when his chickens chased her around the yard. The woman who hummed while baking bread. The woman who was not afraid to get her hands dirty or speak her mind or face down her fears. Marshal Brennan arrived with 2 deputies, both solid men Caleb knew and trusted. They would take the train to St. Louis, stay only as long as necessary, and return. Simple in theory. Caleb knew from experience that simple plans rarely survived contact with reality. The train station in Galesburg was busy, full of travelers heading east and west. Caleb kept close to Rebecca, his hand near his gun, watching faces in the crowd. The deputies flanked them, alert and watchful. They boarded without incident and found seats in the passenger car. The train pulled out, steam hissing, wheels clattering on the tracks. Rebecca sat by the window, watching Illinois roll past. Farmland and small towns, forests and rivers. It was beautiful country, peaceful and prosperous. Hard to believe danger existed in such a place. Caleb sat beside her, feeling the weight of his gun against his hip, wondering if he would need it. They reached St. Louis by late afternoon. The city was huge and noisy after the quiet of Galesburg, full of people and carriages and trains and the constant hum of commerce. The police had arranged rooms for them at a hotel near the station, and they checked in under guard. The deputies took rooms on either side of Rebecca and Caleb. Extra precaution. That evening, a detective from the St. Louis police came to interview Rebecca. His name was Samuel York, a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a notebook that never left his hand. He listened as Rebecca described what she had seen, asked detailed questions, took copious notes. When she finished, he sat back and studied her. "Miss Pierce, your testimony could break this case wide open. We have been looking for Victor Malone for 2 years on various charges. Murder is the most serious yet. If you can identify him in court, we can put him away for life, possibly hang him." "I can identify him," Rebecca said firmly. "I saw his face clearly." "Good. Tomorrow morning, I need you to come to the morgue and identify the body of the man he killed. I know it is not pleasant, but it is necessary for the case. After that, we will arrange for your formal deposition. It will take a few days to process all the paperwork, and then you can return home." After Detective York left, Caleb and Rebecca sat in her hotel room, neither quite ready to separate for the night despite propriety. The room was small and plain but clean, with a single bed, a chair, and a washstand. Caleb sat in the chair while Rebecca sat on the bed, suddenly looking very young and very afraid. "I have never seen a dead body before," she said quietly. "You do not have to do this alone. I will be right there with you. They may not allow it. It is official police business. Then I will wait right outside the door, and the second you step out I will be there." She smiled, though it was shaky. "You are a good man, Caleb Vance." "I am just a man, Rebecca, nothing special. You are special to me." The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Caleb stood, crossed to the bed, and knelt in front of her so they were eye to eye. He took her hands in his, feeling the trembling in her fingers. "When this is over," he said slowly, "when you are safe and free and can make choices without fear, I want you to come back to the ranch with me. Not as someone hiding, as someone who wants to be there, as someone who might want to stay. Caleb, I cannot ask you to. You are not asking. I am offering. These past weeks with you have shown me that lonely is not the same as peaceful. I do not want to be lonely anymore. I want to share my life with someone, with you, if you will have me." Tears filled her eyes. "You cannot possibly know that. We have barely known each other 2 weeks. I know that every morning I wake up happier because I know you are under my roof. I know that when I think about the future, I see you there. I know that I would fight anyone and everyone to keep you safe, not out of duty, but because I care about you more than I have cared about anyone in my life. Maybe it is fast. Maybe it is crazy. But Rebecca, out here you learn not to waste time. Life is too short and too uncertain. When you find something good, you hold on to it. What if I am too damaged?" she whispered. "What if I bring too much trouble? Then we will deal with it together. I'm not afraid of trouble. I am only afraid of losing you before I ever really had you." She leaned forward and kissed him, soft and tentative at first, then deeper. He felt the rightness of it, the way she fit against him, the way her hands came up to hold his face. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, she smiled through her tears. "Yes," she said. "When this is over, I want to come back to the ranch. I want to stay. I want to build a life with you if you truly mean it." "I mean it," he said. "I have never meant anything more in my life." The next morning brought cold reality. The morgue was a grim stone building that smelled of formaldehyde and death. Rebecca went pale the moment they entered, and Caleb took her hand, not caring who saw or what they thought. Detective York met them inside and led them to a room where bodies were kept. "The man was never identified," York explained. "We know from his clothing and personal effects that he had some money, so it was not a simple robbery. We think he might have been involved in criminal activities himself, possibly had a falling out with his associates. Your testimony suggests Victor Malone was one of those associates." He pulled back a sheet covering the body. Rebecca looked, went even paler, but nodded. "That is him. That is the man I saw Victor Malone shoot." "You are certain?" "Yes, I am certain." York covered the body again and led them out. Rebecca was shaking, and the moment they were outside in the cold air, she leaned against the building and took deep breaths. Caleb stood close, shielding her from the curious looks of passers-by. "I am all right," she said after a moment. "I just needed air. You did well. The hard part is over." But he was wrong. The hard part was just beginning. That afternoon, as Rebecca was giving her formal deposition at the police station with Detective York and a court stenographer, Caleb waited in the hallway with one of the deputies. The other deputy had gone to send a telegram to Marshal Brennan with an update. Caleb was restless, uneasy in a way he could not quite explain. Something felt wrong, though he could not put his finger on what. He found out when the deputy who had left suddenly came running back down the hallway, his face urgent. "We have a problem. Someone just wired the Chicago police asking about Rebecca Pierce. They want to know where she is, what she is doing here. It came from a law office representing Harold Stinson." "He knows she is here," Caleb said, feeling his gut tighten. "Looks like it. And if he knows, Malone might know. We need to move her. Now." They went into the room where Rebecca was giving her statement. Detective York looked annoyed at the interruption until he heard the news, and then his face became all business. "We will finish this later. Right now, I am getting Miss Pierce to a safe location. Caleb, you and your men take her back to the hotel, get her things, and bring her to the police station. We have cells here that can be secured. It is not ideal, but it is safer than a hotel." They moved quickly, the four of them, 2 deputies in front, Caleb and Rebecca in the middle. They had made it halfway back to the hotel when Caleb saw him. Victor Malone, standing across the street watching them. Their eyes met, and Malone smiled. It was the most chilling thing Caleb had ever seen. Then Malone touched his hat in a mock salute and disappeared into the crowd. "Go," Caleb said urgently. "He is here. Move." They ran the last block to the hotel. People stared, but Caleb did not care. They got inside, up the stairs, into Rebecca's room. She gathered her few belongings while the deputies watched the hallway. Caleb checked the window, looking down at the street below. It seemed clear, but he did not trust it. They made it back to the police station without incident, though every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Detective York put Rebecca in a back room, not a cell but an office that could be locked and guarded. Caleb stayed with her while the deputies and several police officers secured the building. "He is here," Rebecca said, her voice hollow. "He followed us all this way. He will not get to you. There are too many officers here, too many people watching. He cannot reach you. You do not know him. You do not know what he is capable of. Then it is a good thing he does not know what I am capable of." They stayed in that office for 2 days while Detective York tried to coordinate with authorities to catch Malone. Caleb barely slept, sitting in a chair by the door with his gun in his lap, watching and waiting. Rebecca tried to rest, but he could hear her restless movements, knew she was not sleeping either. On the 3rd day, York came to them with news. "We spotted Malone near the train station. We nearly had him, but he slipped away. But we did learn something. He is not working alone. He has at least 2 other men with him. We think they are planning to make a move when you leave the city." "So what do?" Caleb asked. "We set a trap. We let them think you are leaving, take the expected route, and we have officers waiting. We catch them in the act. You want to use Rebecca as bait. I want to end this so Miss Pierce can live her life without constantly looking over her shoulder. This is the best way to do that." Rebecca spoke up. "I will do it. I am tired of hiding. Let us end this." Caleb wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her face and knew she had made up her mind. "I stay with her, every step." "Agreed," York said. They planned it carefully. Rebecca and Caleb would leave the police station in the evening, visible, making a show of heading to the train station with luggage. The deputies would be with them, but hanging back, looking casual. Plainclothes officers would be stationed throughout the streets between the police station and the train station, watching for Malone and his men. When the attack came, because everyone was certain it would come, the officers would move in and capture them. It was a solid plan. Caleb still did not like it. Evening came. They gathered their things, walked out of the police station into the cold November air. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the streets. They walked toward the train station, moving slowly, making themselves visible. Caleb's senses were on high alert, watching every person, every doorway, every window. Rebecca walked beside him, her face calm but her hand gripping his arm tightly. They were 3 blocks from the train station when it happened. A man stepped out of an alley ahead of them, gun drawn. Victor Malone. Behind them, 2 more men appeared, also armed. They were boxed in. "Miss Pierce," Malone called out, his voice mocking, "you have caused me a great deal of trouble. Time to end this." Caleb pushed Rebecca behind him, his own gun out. The deputies had their weapons drawn too. And from doorways and around corners, plainclothes officers appeared, at least a dozen of them, all with guns aimed at Malone and his men. "Drop your weapons," Detective York called out, stepping into view. "You are surrounded." For a moment, everything was frozen. Then Malone made his choice. He fired at Rebecca. Caleb moved on instinct, throwing himself between her and the bullet. He felt the impact, a burning punch to his left side, and then he was returning fire. His shot took Malone in the chest, and the man went down. The street erupted in gunfire. It was chaos, people screaming, running, officers shouting. Caleb fired again, hitting one of Malone's men. The other tried to run and was tackled by 2 officers, and then it was over as suddenly as it had started. Malone lay on the ground, still alive but badly wounded. His men were being arrested, and Caleb was on his knees, his hand pressed to his bleeding side, Rebecca kneeling beside him with tears streaming down her face. "You are shot," she said, her voice breaking. "Oh God, Caleb, you are shot." "Just a graze," he managed, though it hurt like hellfire. "Are you all right, me? You just took a bullet for me." "Yes, well, I told you I would keep you safe." Detective York appeared above them, already calling for a doctor. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I have ever seen, Vance." "Probably both," Caleb admitted. Then everything went gray and distant, and he felt himself falling. He woke in a hospital bed, disoriented and hurting. The room was white and clean, sunlight streaming through a window. Rebecca sat in a chair beside the bed, her head resting on the mattress, asleep. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, her hair mussed. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. He reached out and touched her hair. She woke immediately, her head snapping up, her eyes going from sleepy to alert in an instant. "Caleb, you are awake." "Oh, thank God you are awake." "How long?" 2 days. The bullet did more damage than they thought at first. It broke a rib, caused internal bleeding. They operated. The doctor said you were lucky. A few inches to the right and it would have hit something vital. Her voice was shaking, tears threatening. "You almost died. You almost died because of me." "Worth it," he said, his voice rough. "You are safe." "Yes, Victor Malone survived. He is in custody, being charged with multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, and various other crimes. He has been talking, trying to cut a deal. He gave up Harold Stinson. Told the authorities everything about Harold's forgery plan, his debts, all of it. Warrants have been issued for Harold's arrest in Chicago. It is over, Caleb. It is finally over." "Good. That is good." "You are an idiot," she said, but she was smiling through her tears. "A brave, wonderful, completely insane idiot, who takes a bullet for someone they have known for 3 weeks. Someone in love," he said simply. She stopped, stared at him. "What did you say?" "I love you, Rebecca. I think I have loved you since you were sitting in my cellar bleeding and being brave. I know it is fast and I know it is crazy, but it is true. I love you." She started crying in earnest now, but she was smiling too, the biggest smile he had ever seen. "I love you too. I love you so much. And when you got shot, when I thought I might lose you, I realized that nothing else matters. Not the money, not Chicago, not any of it. The only thing that matters is you, us, being together." "Then marry me," he said. "Right here, right now." "Well, maybe not right now since I am flat on my back in a hospital bed, but soon, as soon as I can stand. Marry me, Rebecca." She laughed, a sound of pure joy. "Yes, yes, I will marry you, but you have to promise me something, anything." Promise me you will never scare me like that again. Promise me you will stay alive and healthy and with me for a very long time. I promise. I am too stubborn to die anyway. You will be stuck with me for decades. I can live with that." She leaned down and kissed him, gentle because of his injuries but full of love and promise. And Caleb, who had spent 3 years thinking he wanted to be alone, realized he had been waiting his whole life for this moment, for this woman, for this love that had found him in the most unexpected way. He spent another week in the hospital before the doctors would release him. Rebecca stayed with him every day, reading to him, talking with him, just being there. Detective York visited to tie up loose ends. Harold Stinson had been arrested in Chicago, caught trying to flee to Canada. Between his crimes and Malone's testimony, he would be spending many years in prison. The forgeries had been exposed and invalidated. Rebecca's inheritance was secure. "What will you do with it?" Caleb asked her one afternoon. "All that money." "I have been thinking about that. Most of it I want to keep invested, safe and secure. But some of it I would like to use to help people. Women like me, maybe, who find themselves in dangerous situations. And I would like to expand the ranch if you are amenable. Buy more land, more cattle. Build something real and lasting." "Our ranch," he corrected. "If we are getting married, it is our ranch." "Our ranch," she agreed, smiling. "I like the sound of that." When Caleb was finally released, they took the train back to Galesburg. Marshal Brennan met them at the station, grinning widely. "I heard you caused quite a stir in St. Louis, Caleb. Shot down a wanted criminal and got yourself shot in the process." "Not bad for a quiet rancher." "I could have done without the getting shot part," Caleb said. He was still moving carefully, his side healing but not yet fully recovered. "And Miss Pierce, I heard congratulations are in order." Rebecca blushed. "News travels fast. Small town." "Word is you two are planning to get married." "As soon as possible," Caleb confirmed. "No point in waiting. We have wasted enough time already." They were married 2 weeks later in the church in Galesburg. It was a small ceremony, just a few friends and neighbors, but it was perfect. Rebecca wore a simple white dress, and Caleb wore his best suit, the one he had not worn in 3 years. Jim Carlson stood up as his best man, and the woman who ran the general store stood with Rebecca. Marshal Brennan attended, along with most of the town, curious to see the wealthy Chicago heiress who had captured the heart of their reclusive rancher. Caleb barely noticed any of them. He only had eyes for Rebecca as she walked down the aisle toward him, her face radiant with happiness. When he took her hands and said his vows, promising to love and cherish her for the rest of his life, he meant every word with an intensity that surprised even him. They went back to the ranch as husband and wife, and for the first time, Caleb felt like his house was truly a home. Rebecca threw herself into ranch life with enthusiasm, learning everything she could about cattle and horses, about farming and frontier living. She was a quick study, and within months, she was as comfortable on a horse as any ranch hand. They used some of Rebecca's money to buy adjoining land, doubling the size of the ranch. They built a new barn and hired 2 ranch hands to help with the expanding herd. They added rooms to the house, preparing for the future they both wanted. And every night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Caleb thanked whatever force of fate had sent Rebecca Pierce running into his cellar that November night. The first year of their marriage was busy and full and happy. They worked side by side, building their ranch into something prosperous. Rebecca started her charity work, helping to establish a fund for women in difficult situations, providing them with resources and protection. She corresponded regularly with authorities to ensure Harold Stinson remained in prison, and that Victor Malone, who had been hanged for his crimes, could never hurt anyone else. In the spring of 1884, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. Caleb had never thought much about children during his lonely years, but the moment she told him, he felt a joy so profound it took his breath away. They spent the summer preparing for the baby, turning one of the upstairs rooms into a nursery. Rebecca insisted on painting it herself, despite Caleb's protests that she should rest. "I am pregnant, not fragile," she told him, laughing. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time while still doing everything else. I will not be treated like glass." Their son was born on a cold December night in 1884, arriving 3 weeks early in a rush that barely left time to fetch the midwife. Caleb had been terrified, watching Rebecca labor, feeling helpless and useless. But she had been amazing, strong, and determined, and when he finally heard the baby's cry and saw his son for the first time, red-faced and squalling and perfect, he felt something shift inside him. He was a father. He had a family. They named him Thomas Caleb Vance, after Marshall Brennan, who had helped them so much. Little Tommy was healthy and loud, with his mother's hazel eyes and his father's dark hair. He kept them exhausted and elated in equal measure. Caleb discovered that sleep deprivation was a special kind of torture, but he would not have traded it for anything. Rebecca took to motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else. She nursed Tommy herself, refusing to hire a wet nurse despite her wealth making it possible. "He is my son," she said. "I want to be the one who cares for him." Life settled into a new rhythm. The ranch continued to prosper. Caleb and Rebecca worked together, partners in every sense of the word, while Tommy grew from infant to toddler, stumbling around the ranch on unsteady legs, charming everyone he met. By the time he was 2, he was already trying to help with the animals, feeding the chickens and petting the horses under his parents' watchful eyes. In the spring of 1887, Rebecca announced she was pregnant again. This time it was twins, a shock that left both her and Caleb reeling. 2 babies. They scrambled to prepare, expanding the nursery, buying double of everything. The pregnancy was harder this time, with Rebecca struggling with fatigue and sickness. Caleb worried constantly, hovering over her until she threatened to hit him with a frying pan if he did not give her some space. The twins, a boy and a girl, were born in October 1887. Rebecca went into labor in the middle of the afternoon, and this time Caleb had plenty of time to panic while the midwife worked. It was a long labor, made more complicated by the twins, and there were moments when Caleb thought he might lose his mind from worry. But Rebecca came through it, exhausted but triumphant, and their twins were healthy. They named the boy James after Caleb's father and the girl Sarah Rose, a name Rebecca had always loved. With 3 children under the age of 4, the house was chaos. Happy chaos, but chaos nonetheless. Caleb had never worked so hard in his life, and he had worked some very hard jobs. But every time he looked at his family, at Rebecca rocking a baby while Tommy climbed on his knee, he felt that same profound joy. This was what life was supposed to be. Not lonely solitude on a ranch, but noise and love and mess and laughter. Marshall Brennan visited often, watching the growing family with satisfaction. "Never thought I would see the day when Caleb Vance had a house full of kids," he said one afternoon, bouncing little Sarah on his knee while James slept in his arms. "You were the most confirmed bachelor I knew." "I was not confirmed, just waiting," Caleb corrected. "I just did not know what I was waiting for until Rebecca stumbled into my life." "Literally stumbled into your cellar," Rebecca added, smiling. She was nursing Tommy, who had refused to be left out and insisted on nursing even though he was really too old for it. Bleeding and terrified and desperate. "Best thing that ever happened to me," Caleb said, meaning it absolutely. The years passed. The children grew. Tommy became a serious, thoughtful boy who loved books and learning, much to Rebecca's delight. She taught him to read early, and by the time he was 5, he was devouring every book they could get him. James was his opposite, wild and energetic, always climbing something or exploring somewhere he should not be. Sarah was quiet and observant, watching everything with big hazel eyes that missed nothing. In 1890, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again, much to her surprise. "I thought we were done," she told Caleb, laughing. "3 seemed like plenty." "Apparently not," he said, unable to stop grinning. He loved their chaotic family, loved being a father, loved every aspect of this life they had built together. Their 4th child, another boy they named Daniel, was born in early 1891. He was an easy baby, content and happy, as if he knew he had arrived into a family that was already running at full capacity and had decided not to make extra trouble. By the mid-1890s, the Vance ranch was one of the most prosperous in the area. They had expanded several times, now running hundreds of head of cattle and breeding horses that were known throughout Illinois. Rebecca's charity work had grown too, with funds established in multiple cities to help women in need. She had become a respected voice for women's rights, writing articles for newspapers and speaking at events when she could spare the time from the ranch and children. Tommy was now a young man of 16, already taller than his father, planning to attend university in the East. James, at 14, had declared he wanted to be a rancher like his father and spent all his time learning the business. Sarah, at 13, was showing an aptitude for horses that surpassed even Rebecca's natural talent. And Daniel, at 8, was still figuring out who he wanted to be. Caleb was in his mid-40s now, his hair starting to gray at the temples, his face weathered by years of sun and wind. But he had never been happier. He and Rebecca had built something lasting, something good. They had created a legacy not just of prosperity but of love and family and community. One evening in the summer of 1898, Caleb and Rebecca sat on their porch, watching the sunset as they had done countless times over the years. The children were all inside, the older ones helping the younger with evening chores. The ranch spread out before them, golden in the evening light, peaceful and beautiful. "You remember that first night?" Rebecca asked, her hand in his. "When you found me in your cellar?" "Every detail," Caleb said. "You were terrified and brave and bleeding." "And I was annoyed at having my solitude interrupted," she laughed. "Were you really annoyed?" "For about 5 seconds. Then I looked at you and something shifted. I did not know it at the time, but my whole life was about to change. Mine too. I thought I was running toward death. Instead, I ran toward life, toward you, toward all of this." She gestured at the ranch, the house, the life they had built. "I love you," Caleb said, the same words he had spoken countless times over the years, but they never lost their power. "Thank you for hiding in my cellar." She laughed again, that bright, joyful sound that still made his heart lift. "Thank you for not shooting me when you found me there." "Well, I would have been an idiot to shoot the best thing that ever happened to me." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Inside, they could hear their children laughing, arguing, living. This was happiness. This was home. And it had all started with a gunshot on a cold November night, and a woman hiding in a cellar, bringing love into the life of a lonely rancher, who had not even known he was lonely until she arrived. Years later, when their children were grown and starting families of their own, Caleb would look back on his life and marvel at how one night had changed everything. How courage and kindness and love had transformed 2 people running from loneliness and danger into a family that spanned generations. Tommy brought his wife home to the ranch in 1900, a school teacher named Elizabeth who fit into the family as if she had always been there. They had their first child, a daughter named Rebecca after her grandmother, in 1901. James married a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property in 1903, combining their lands and creating an even larger operation. Sarah, independent as ever, went east to study veterinary medicine, one of the first women to do so, and came back in 1905 with a degree and plans to start the first veterinary practice in the region. Daniel, after trying several different paths, discovered a talent for business and took over managing the financial side of the ranch. Through it all, Caleb and Rebecca remained partners, lovers, best friends. They weathered the challenges that came with life, the droughts and harsh winters, the economic downturns and personal losses. Rebecca's health declined slowly over the years, the lingering effects of that long-ago gunshot wound causing her pain as she aged. Caleb took care of her with the same devotion he had shown that first night, and she faced her declining health with characteristic courage. In the spring of 1915, as they sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard, Rebecca leaned against Caleb and said, "I would not change a single thing. Not the danger, not the fear, not the gunshot. All of it led me here to you, to this life. It was worth it." "You are the bravest person I have ever known," Caleb told her. "From that first night to this moment, you have amazed me every single day." "We were both brave," she corrected. "You opened your door to a stranger in trouble. You protected me when you had no reason to. You built this life with me." "We did it together." "Together," he agreed. "Always together." They remained there as the sun set, two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful. The ranch that Caleb had once inhabited alone now teemed with life and love, multiple generations carrying on the legacy they had started. As darkness fell and the stars began to appear, their grandchildren called to them from inside, wanting stories before bed. Caleb helped Rebecca to her feet, and they went inside together, surrounded by the family they had created, the love they had built, the life they had chosen. And somewhere in that house filled with laughter and light, the memory of a lonely rancher and a woman hiding in a cellar lived on, a reminder that love often comes when we least expect it, in forms we never imagined, changing everything in the most wonderful ways.